The 1960s and 70s were a golden yet turbulent time for animation, an age when Saturday mornings felt like portals to forgotten worlds. But hidden beneath the famous titles are strange, experimental, and long-lost series that time buried. What happened to these bizarre shows? Why were they abandoned? Today, we're unearthing 20 obscure animated series you've likely never seen. The Mighty Heroes, 1966. When Terry Toons debuted The Mighty Heroes, it was supposed to be a parody of superhero mania sweeping the mid-60s. Featuring 5 bumbling heroes, Strong Man, Tornado Man, Rope Man, Cuckoo Man, and Diaper Man, the show leaned into slapstick absurdity. Critics at the time dismissed it as silly filler compared to Spider-Man or the Superman-Aquaman Hour, but children adored the chaos. What made it obscure was its short lifespan. Only a single season of 20 episodes aired, often chopped into shorts alongside Mighty Mouse. Behind the scenes, creators had hoped it might launch a new franchise of toys and comics, but it lacked studio backing. By 1967, the Mighty Heroes had vanished from airwaves, remembered only by devoted fans who traded VHS bootlegs in the 80s. And yet, there's a strange charm to the show's chaotic energy. Long before parody cartoons became mainstream, these heroes mocked the very idea of superhero perfection. Today, watching Diaper Man waddle into battle feels like a reminder that even failure can leave behind cult magic. The Adventures of Gulliver, 1968, Hanna-Barbera adapted Gulliver's Travels into a Saturday morning adventure series, but with their own twist, adding a faithful dog named Tag and turning Lemuel Gulliver into a wholesome teen idol. The show was both imaginative and strangely sanitized. While Jonathan Swift's novel was biting satire, this cartoon stripped away the darkness, replacing it with gentle lessons. It only lasted 17 episodes, largely because critics found it derivative of Johnny Quest and the Herculoids. Kids, however, were enchanted by the Lilliputians and their miniature gadgets. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera struggled with budgets, often reusing animation frames and relying on recycled sound effects. Though short-lived, the series has a haunting legacy. For many who watched it, the lush backgrounds and dreamlike music left an impression far greater than the scripts. In the end, The Adventures of Gulliver proved that even watered-down classics can echo through memory with surreal beauty. Here Comes the Grump, 1969. Produced by Departier Freleng, the same studio behind the Pink Panther shorts, Here Comes the Grump was a psychedelic odyssey wrapped in comedy. It followed Princess Dawn and her friends as they tried to lift a spell of gloom cast by the evil and hilariously inept Grump. Unlike standard adventure cartoons, this series leaned heavily into surreal, almost kaleidoscopic visuals. The backgrounds were swirling, dreamlike landscapes that mirrored the counterculture art movement of the late 60s. Still, its humor was hit or miss. The Grump, voiced by Rip Taylor, was more irritating than menacing, and children often didn't know what to make of the bizarre plots. The show ran for 2 seasons, but faded quickly as networks preferred safer, formula-driven titles. Yet its oddball tone made it a cult favorite among psychedelic art collectors and vintage cartoon fans decades later. Today, Here Comes the Grump feels like a time capsule of an era when even children's TV dared to experiment with strangeness. The Hardy Boys, 1969. When Hanna-Barbera adapted the Hardy Boys into animation, the goal was to tap into teen culture and the rise of bubblegum pop. The classic detective brothers, Frank and Joe Hardy, weren't just sleuths this time, they were also rock musicians. Each episode combined mystery solving with a musical number, complete with psychedelic, Beatles-inspired visuals that tried to mimic the Monkees' TV success. Public reception was mixed. Kids liked the groovy songs, but critics thought it was a strange mashup of Scooby-Doo-style mysteries and half-hearted music videos. NBC executives hoped the band angle would lead to real record sales, but the music never charted. Behind the scenes, production was troubled by censorship rules. Storylines were watered down to avoid anything resembling violence or real crime. The show only lasted one season, and its soundtrack quickly disappeared into obscurity. Yet the Hardy Boys cartoon remains fascinating for its experiment in cross-promotion. Long before shows like Jem and the Holograms or even Hannah Montana, it was trying to blend detective adventures with pop star dreams. It may not have solved the mystery of Saturday morning ratings, but it left behind a colorful clue of television's restless experimentation. Sabrina and the Groovy Ghoulies, 1970. Filmation's Groovy Ghoulies was one of the strangest monster mashups of the era. A spin-off of the Archie Comedy Hour, it featured Sabrina, the teenage witch, teaming up with a cast of wacky, pun-cracking monsters like Drac, Frankie, and Wolfie. Instead of gothic horror, the show was pure comedy, punctuated by psychedelic musical segments that bordered on parody. At first, kids adored the slapstick humor and silly songs, but parents were less enthused. Some found the constant puns grating, and critics dismissed it as low effort compared to rival Hanna-Barbera productions. Behind the scenes, Filmation worked with razor-thin budgets, relying heavily on recycled backgrounds and repeated gags. Despite this, the series built a loyal fan base who appreciated its campy charm. Its downfall came when CBS decided to cut back on monster programming, fearing backlash from parents who thought the show was too spooky for younger children. After 2 seasons, Groovy Ghoulies was gone, yet it refuses to die entirely. Clips resurface at Halloween, and collectors treat it as a cult treasure. The Ghoulies may have been goofy, but they captured a moment when even monsters wanted to rock out. The Reluctant Dragon and Mr. Toad Show, 1970. Produced by Rankin/Bass, this series was based on Kenneth Grahame's beloved literary characters, but it never found its footing. Each half-hour episode was split into segments, one featuring Mr., Toad of the Wind in the Willows, and the other starring the gentle, poetry-loving Reluctant Dragon. In theory, it was a whimsical pairing. In practice, the show struggled with tone. Mr. Toad's reckless adventures were played for slapstick, while the Reluctant Dragon's stories were softer, sometimes bordering on preachy. Audiences, especially children, couldn't quite connect with the split personality of the show. Critics accused it of being too slow-paced compared to the flashier, gag-driven cartoons dominating Saturday mornings. Behind the scenes, Rankin/Bass poured effort into the art design, trying to capture a storybook feel. But CBS executives quickly grew nervous about ratings, and after just 1 season, the series was quietly canceled. Ironically, both characters lived on in other adaptations, making this cartoon seem like an odd misstep in otherwise enduring legacies. Today, The Reluctant Dragon and Mr. Toad Show feels like a relic of a time when networks still experimented with literary adaptations for kids. Though forgotten by most, its gentle storytelling stands out as a curious detour in the louder, zanier landscape of 70s animation. CABB 2020, 1972. Hanna-Barbera dove into science fiction with CABB 2020, a futuristic series about an undersea research base and its crew. Marketed as an educational adventure, it aimed to teach kids about oceanography, conservation, and teamwork. Unlike many of its contemporaries, CABB 2020 took itself seriously, with plots about pollution, endangered species, and undersea exploration. But seriousness wasn't what Saturday morning audiences wanted. Children found it dry compared to Scooby-Doo or Josie and the Pussycats, and its ratings quickly sank. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera faced challenges animating underwater sequences convincingly, often reusing stock footage or awkwardly floating character models. The show lasted only 13 episodes before cancellation. Yet, decades later, it achieved a bizarre second life. In 2000, Cartoon Network's Adult Swim parodied it with CABB 2021, turning the serious environmental show into an absurd, dark comedy. Suddenly, a forgotten flop became the foundation for cult adult humor. In a way, CABB 2020 embodies the strange fate of obscure cartoons, mocked in their own time, resurrected decades later in the most unexpected ways. Its message about protecting the ocean may have been overlooked then, but today it feels eerily ahead of its time. Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch, 1974. When Hanna-Barbera launched Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch, it was clear they were inspired by the success of Disney's Herbie the Love Bug. Wheelie was a red Volkswagen Beetle with human-like eyes, capable of emotion, speech, and even romance. His enemies? A gang of talking motorcycles known as the Chopper Bunch, who constantly schemed to make his life miserable. At first glance, the show was a playful blend of slapstick car chases and light-hearted comedy. Kids who loved toy cars found the premise appealing. Yet critics accused it of being a thinly veiled rehash of wacky races and Speed Buggy, both of which had already saturated the market. The biggest issue? Characters lacked depth, and episodes relied heavily on repetitive gags of Wheelie outsmarting the gang. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera wrestled with overproduction. By the mid-70s, they were cranking out multiple shows per season, often stretching animators thin. This led to recycled backgrounds and choppy animation. NBC aired the series for just one season before pulling it, and Wheelie rolled into obscurity. Still, there's something oddly charming about a beetle standing up to biker bullies. Partridge Family. 2200 AD, 1974. By the mid-70s, networks were desperate to capitalize on the success of family sitcoms in animation. Filmation had already made waves with the Brady Kids, so when ABC pitched The Partridge Family, 2200 AD, it seemed like a natural extension. The concept was simple, yet bizarre. Take the popular musical family and transplant them into the space age. In this futuristic cartoon, the Partridges lived in a Jetsons-like world filled with robots, flying cars, and outer space adventures. Each episode mixed sci-fi hijinks with musical interludes, but the charm of the live-action cast was lost in translation. While the Partridge Family TV series thrived on David Cassidy's charisma and Shirley Jones's warmth, their animated counterparts felt hollow. Audience response was tepid. Fans of the live-action show dismissed it as a gimmick, while kids who loved sci-fi found it too soft compared to flashier space adventures. Production-wise, Filmation leaned heavily on limited animation, cutting corners wherever possible. After a single season, the show was canceled, remembered more as a curiosity than a triumph. Yet it remains a fascinating time capsule. Before Star Wars redefined space fantasy, television was still fumbling with futuristic family comedies. Partridge Family 2200 AD was a strange experiment, one that proved not every pop culture hit could survive a rocket trip to the future. Develin, 1974. Hanna-Barbera tried to tap into America's obsession with daredevils in the 70s, particularly Evel Knievel. The result was Develin, an animated series following Ernie Develin, a motorcycle stunt performer who traveled with his siblings, performing in a circus while solving problems on the side. On paper, it was a thrilling idea. In execution, it was surprisingly somber. Unlike many zany Saturday morning shows, Develin focused on morality tales. Each episode emphasized responsibility, honesty, and family values. ABC's standards and practices demanded the writers avoid glorifying reckless stunts, which meant action sequences were toned down, often ending with lectures about safety. This contradiction, selling a daredevil show while discouraging danger, confused audiences. Children expecting Evel Knievel-style thrills found themselves watching sermons disguised as adventures. Ratings fell quickly, and Develin lasted only 16 episodes. Hanna-Barbera's animators, already stretched thin, couldn't inject the series with the flair needed to compete against Scooby-Doo or Hong Kong Phooey. Today, Develin feels like an odd relic of compromise, caught between daring stunts and cautious moralizing. It's obscure, but for some it stands as a reminder of the tightrope networks walked in trying to entertain kids without offending parents. These Are the Days, 1974. Filmation, known for its offbeat and often cheaply produced cartoons, surprised many with These Are the Days. Set in the late 19th century, it followed the Day family in a small town, portraying their everyday lives. Instead of zany antics, the show was grounded in slice-of-life drama, almost like a pioneer-era version of The Waltons. Critics praised its ambition. It was rare for Saturday morning cartoons to tackle realism, especially with themes like family struggles, small-town morality, and the challenges of rural living. Yet kids didn't flock to it. Without slapstick humor, monsters, or superheroes, These Are the Days felt too slow for its target audience. Behind the scenes, Filmation poured unusual care into the series, aiming for heartfelt storytelling rather than quick gags. Animators even studied period clothing and architecture to give it authenticity. But ratings didn't justify the effort. After just one season, the show was canceled. Looking back, These Are the Days stands out as a bold but doomed experiment. It dared to treat children as thoughtful viewers, willing to explore gentle drama instead of constant comedy. And though forgotten by most, it remains a quiet gem for those who believe animation can tell even the simplest human stories. Valley of the Dinosaurs, 1974. Hanna-Barbera struck gold with Land of the Lost, so when CBS wanted its own prehistoric adventure, they turned to the animation powerhouse. Valley of the Dinosaurs told the story of the Butler family swept into a whirlpool while rafting and transported to a hidden valley where dinosaurs still roamed. The show blended educational elements with adventure. Characters frequently explained natural science concepts, like fire-making or survival tactics, to its young audience. At the same time, they befriended a cave family and struggled against dinosaurs and natural hazards. While conceptually sound, it lacked the tension of Land of the Lost. Critics called it a softened survival story, and ratings reflected that sentiment. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera fought strict censorship rules, limiting depictions of violence. Writers had to remove life-threatening stakes, leaving the show's danger watered down. Even dinosaurs, supposedly terrifying, often looked comical due to budget animation shortcuts. The series lasted just one season of 16 episodes. Still, for some viewers, it offered a surreal escape into a world of stone tools and prehistoric wonder. While overshadowed by stronger contemporaries, Valley of the Dinosaurs remains a fascinating fossil of 70s animation, ambitious, flawed, yet hauntingly imaginative. Goober and the Ghostchasers, 1973. If Scooby-Doo proved anything, it was that audiences loved mystery-solving teens with a quirky pet. A BC tried to double down on the formula with Goober and the Ghostchasers, swapping Scooby for a green, beanie-wearing dog who could turn invisible when frightened. The series followed Goober and his group of reporters as they investigated paranormal cases. To boost appeal, the show frequently featured animated versions of pop stars from the Partridge Family. But unlike Scooby-Doo, its mysteries often had real supernatural elements, making it darker in tone. That gamble didn't pay off. Critics said it lacked charm, and Goober himself came off more annoying than lovable. Production also suffered. Hanna-Barbera, overloaded with projects, reused animation frames and gags. Ratings lagged, and the show lasted just 16 episodes. Behind the scenes, executives worried parents would object to the darker supernatural elements, forcing scripts to shift mid-production, creating tonal inconsistency. Still, Goober and the Ghostchasers is remembered by a niche audience who loved its eerie atmosphere. While Scooby became iconic, Goober became a ghost himself, haunting only the memories of those who caught him on Saturday mornings. Inch High, Private Eye, 1973. NBC thought it had a surefire hit with Inch High, Private Eye, a detective parody centered on a pint-sized sleuth who stood only an inch tall. Along with his niece and sidekick, Inch High investigated crimes using his small size as an advantage, slipping into safes, spying unnoticed, or sneaking past guards. While imaginative, the show leaned heavily on a single joke. He's tiny. Critics panned it as gimmicky, and children quickly grew tired of repetitive plots. Adding to its troubles, the character's squeaky voice divided audiences. Some found it funny, others unbearable. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera hoped to cash in on the detective craze sparked by Scooby-Doo. But with weak scripts and minimal promotion, it was canceled after 13 episodes. Unlike other failed shows, it rarely resurfaced in reruns, cementing its obscurity. Yet there's a strange poignancy in Inch High's fate. A show about a small detective was itself too small to make an impact. It serves as a reminder that clever premises alone can't sustain a series. Without strong storytelling, even the tiniest idea fades into the shadows of history. Clue Club, 1976. By the mid-'70s, the mystery-solving teens with pets formula had been milked dry. Still, Hanna-Barbera produced Clue Club, another entry in the genre. This time, the team consisted of 4 teenage detectives and 2 talking dogs, Woofer and Whimper. Unlike Scooby-Doo's bumbling comedy, Clue Club tried to balance humor with more intricate mysteries. Audiences were lukewarm. Some kids enjoyed its slightly more serious tone, but many saw it as a dull imitation of Scooby-Doo. The dogs, meant to be the comic relief, were criticized as irritating, with Woofer constantly claiming credit for solving cases. Ratings fell, and after 1 season, the show was quietly retired. Behind the curtain, Hanna-Barbera had hoped Clue Club could replace Scooby if interest waned. But Scooby's grip was unshakable. Without a strong identity of its own, Clue Club was destined for the forgotten pile. Today, the series stands as proof of just how desperate networks were to replicate Scooby's magic. Ironically, its attempt to stand out only made it more forgettable, a mystery lost to the very era it tried to define. The Roman Holidays, 1972. After the success of the Flintstones and the Jetsons, Hanna-Barbera tried once more to capture lightning in a bottle with the Roman Holidays. Instead of prehistory or the future, this sitcom was set in ancient Rome. The Holidays were an ordinary Roman family dealing with everyday problems, except those problems involved centurions, emperors, and chariot traffic jams. On paper, it was clever, a twist on the family sitcom with historical flair. But critics and audiences weren't impressed. The humor felt recycled from the Flintstones, with Roman togas replacing Stone Age clubs. Production was rushed, and writers struggled to generate fresh stories in a setting that limited creative possibilities. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera. Executives were optimistic, pushing the show as the next big family. Yet after just 13 episodes, NBC canceled it. Its failure revealed that simply swapping time periods wasn't enough. Viewers wanted heart, not gimmicks. Today, the Roman Holidays exists as a curiosity, an animated reminder that formulas, once fresh, eventually crumble. The holidays themselves may be forgotten, but their failure marked the end of Hanna-Barbera's attempts to endlessly clone their biggest hits. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids, 1973, capitalizing on the enduring popularity of the 1969 film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Hanna-Barbera created an animated rock group version of the outlaw duo. In this show, Butch Cassidy led a pop band that moonlighted as secret agents solving mysteries and battling villains. The Sundance Kids weren't gunslingers, but guitar-playing teens. Reception was lukewarm at best. Audiences found the connection to the classic Western baffling. Why name a bubblegum spy band after iconic outlaws? Critics accused Hanna-Barbera of shamelessly latching onto a famous title without respecting its origins. To make matters worse, the animation was flat and the characters forgettable. The show lasted only 13 episodes, a commercial flop. But in retrospect, it's fascinating as an example of 70s cross-marketing gone wrong. The producers desperately wanted another hit, like Josie and the Pussycats, blending music and espionage, but they lacked the right alchemy. For those who saw it, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids remains a bizarre relic, proof that even legends of the Old West weren't safe from Saturday morning rebranding. Hong Kong Phooey, 1974. On the surface, Hong Kong Phooey looked like another Hanna-Barbera knockoff, combining martial arts craze with slapstick comedy. Yet despite its flaws, it has achieved cult status today. Voiced by the charismatic Scatman Crothers, Phooey was a mild-mannered janitor who transformed into a kung fu crime fighter, albeit a hilariously incompetent one. While children loved it, critics accused the show of leaning into offensive stereotypes. Martial arts experts cringed at its clumsy action scenes, and advocacy groups complained about caricatures of Asian culture. Behind the scenes, however, animators argued they were parodying tropes, not endorsing them. Ratings were decent, but not enough to sustain a long run. After 16 episodes, it was canceled. Yet reruns in the 80s and 90s gave it second life, cementing its place in pop culture as both problematic and beloved. Hong Kong Phooey remains obscure compared to Scooby-Doo, but its mix of funky theme music and Scatman's charm ensured it wouldn't fade completely. It's a reminder that even flawed creations can become cult icons. Fantastic Voyage, 1968, inspired by the hit 1966 film Filmation's Fantastic Voyage, turned the concept of miniaturized humans traveling inside the body into a Saturday morning adventure. The CEMDF, Combined Miniature Defense Force, was shrunk down to microscopic size to battle threats inside living organisms. With futuristic gadgets and science-based plots, it aimed to educate while thrilling. Though imaginative, the show struggled with pacing. Science-heavy explanations often bogged down the action, and limited animation hurt its ambitious visuals. Still, for kids fascinated by biology, it was mesmerizing. The voice cast gave it weight, and the scripts tried to blend entertainment with genuine science. Unfortunately, CBS pulled the plug after 17 episodes, citing low ratings. Behind the scenes, animators were frustrated. This was one of their most creative projects, but the budget couldn't match the ambition. Today, Fantastic Voyage feels ahead of its time, a rare attempt to fuse real science with sci-fi adventure in children's television. Forgotten by most, it remains a shining example of when animation dared to dream big, even if the dream couldn't last. The 60s and 70s gave us more than iconic hits. They left behind experiments, failures, and forgotten gems. These obscure animated series remind us that even the strangest flops carried creativity worth remembering. Which of these oddities do you recall? Like, subscribe, and share your forgotten favorite in the comments below.